Okay, so what is the abomination of desolation? All I can say is you don't want to be there when it happens. It actually initially happened under Antiochus Epiphanes as part of the Maccabean War period. So we're talking about 167 to 164 BC. He went in and sacrificed pigs in the Holy of Holies in the temple. Of course, pigs were unclean animals, so this was an unclean sacrifice. It was seen as an abomination before God, an abominating sacrifice. So it's called the abomination of desolation. And so that's the initial example. And then the expectation is among some who hold to a future return for Christ that this kind of act will be repeated in a renewed temple in the future that will be done by the Antichrist. It's a reflection of his rebellion before God. And so this is what we call a typological prophecy, where there's a pattern where something happens in one period is like what something happens in another, is like what something happens in another, and then at the end it's going to happen oftentimes in a more encompassing kind of way. There are all kinds of typological prophecies in the Old Testament. The Exodus sometimes is portrayed as you have the Exodus in Egypt, you have an Exodus in the midst of exile, you have an Exodus when in the time of the New Testament, creation and new creation, same kind of image. Day of the Lord is probably the best illustration. You had the locust plagues in Joel that set the base, and then any time when God comes in severe judgment, it's portrayed as the day of the Lord. And there's more than one across history, but eventually there will be the day of the Lord that will be the final judgment. These patterns repeat themselves, and so these prophecies don't just deal with the initial fulfillment or even the period of history in which the person is writing, but that pictures something that's going to happen again and again. That feeds into the Olivet Discourse of Matthew 24 and 25 and is an example of there's the destruction of the temple in AD 70. That's the short-term realization. And then there is everything associated with the destruction of with the restoration of the temple in the end. One mirrors the other. So it's a pattern prophecy or a mirror prophecy.